YouTube, Biker Mike here with a video on how I installed my Raymarine EV100 Autopilot system in my Lund Tyee aluminum fishing boat. So as you can see here, the first thing I did was mounted the control head up here on the dash. Now there was a speedometer in this location, but as you guys know, boat speedometers really aren't that accurate, and I've actually got the speed that'll show there, and as well it'll show on my graph when my graph's all hooked up. So the speedometer wasn't a big deal to get rid of and for me, so I just took the speedometer out. So this dash piece here that had the speedometer in there, it already had a big hole, but I had to make it a little bit bigger to fit this. And I also had to take out some of the material back here on the dash to accommodate it. So that's how I got that mounted in there. I'll go through how I mounted everything first, and then I'll go through how it's all connected electrically, and then I'll go through the hydraulic system, because this is the EV100 is a hydraulic steer pack. So it's actually a 12-volt pump that's controlled by the computer that tells the pump which way to turn the boat. So my boat has the C-Star hydraulic steering in it, so this is obviously for boats equipped with hydraulic steering. Over here I got the 9-axis heading sensor mounted on Lund's Sport Track bracket, and it's important to note that this needs to be mounted level as the boat sits in the water, and level side to side. So it needs to be mounted level that way and that way, as close to it as you can. So it's pretty simple to mount that up to the Sport Track bracket. I did have to put a couple shims up in there just to get it at the right angle where the screws go through. So that's how I got the heading sensor mounted. So down here under the helm, this is where the bulk of the installation is. Up here you can see the control unit. I got it mounted through the side of the boat here. There's just some stainless pan head screws with some nuts holding the unit on right up there. So that's where I decided to mount the control unit, right up. And another important thing to note, it needs to be mounted straight up and down. Down here you can see where I mounted the hydraulic pump. Now you might want to do yours differently. This is just how I did mine. I wanted to keep it in the most upright position as I could without putting too many bends or twists in the hydraulic lines. So what I did, I just used a pressure treated 2x4, and down here over on this side, down here in a little tackle tray, I just went through with some screws right into that 2x4. You could use bolts and secure it in that way too. And then I just used more screws, wood screws, to hold on the pump to the 2x4. So it's mounted in there very solid. It's not going anywhere. So that's where I chose to mount those two items. And it's all in behind this kick panel here that I just took out. So over here you can see the network hub for the EV100. So this is proprietary to Raymarine. It's called C-Talk, but it's really just the same as NMEA systems. So with the black and blue, that's your backbone. And then these are all your spurs. The black and white are your spur connections. So one of those will go to the control head up on the dash, and the other one goes to the heading sensor that I showed you on the Sport Track system. And then the backbone comes over here to a T, and then it comes off, and a spur goes up to the control unit. And then on the other end of the T, I came off with another backbone that comes up here that goes into the NMEA network in my boat. Now I'm running a Lowrance Elite FS9, and I also run a Motor Guide XI5 electric trolling motor that's on that network. but I wanted it networked to my chart so I can pick a waypoint on the chart and the boat will steer itself to the waypoint. So there was a few hiccups in doing that, and I'll get into that later, but it still wasn't that bad. So this adapter is a special adapter that connects Raymarine C-Talk to your standard NMEA networks. So with this cable, I ran it up into the helm that connects into my network for the Lowrance Elite FS9, and that's where the Raymarine control unit gets its information on your GPS position, because without that being connected into something that has a GPS signal, you'll only be able to run magnetic heading lock on your boat and just control your boat's heading with the north magnetic heading sensor. So I wanted it obviously connected to a GPS as well, so it uses both. And then you can also, once it's connected to something with a GPS, you can run all the fishing patterns with it, and I'll get into all that later. And I'll do a C demonstration of how all this works too. This was a pretty big learning curve for me to take on. The installation price on doing this was roughly $1,000 to $1,500, so I did save quite a bit of money doing it myself, and I've never really worked on marine networks before, so it was a pretty big learning curve, but it's really not that complicated. And if you plan on doing this, I can save you a few headaches on just following along with what I did and how I did it. So on to the hydraulics portion of this installation. I needed to order a kit, and I'll leave a link down in the description of where I got my Autopilot hydraulic hose kit. It comes with all the fittings you need and all the hoses, and it's a little pricey, but I guess that's what you gotta do to get the job done. I'll leave a link in the description where I got mine. I think Octopus and Cytex, or I think that's what it's called, they both make kits. I ended up with the Octopus one, and like I said, I'll leave a link in the description of this video where you can buy that. So it doesn't matter which line you hook up on each port. When you go to commission the Autopilot for the first time and go through all the settings, you can correct which way they're hooked up. So this other line is a non-pressurized line that goes back up to the helm, and I'll show you where that connects in. All right, so up here inside the dash, up in the helm, you can see the back of the C-Star helm here, and that's one of the T's that comes in the Octopus kit, and another T over there, and then your return line is way down there at the bottom. So I did all this through this space right here, and it wasn't too bad, but there is a plug at the bottom of the helm that connects this return line to it. So you need to remove that plug and put the adapter on. So these two T's came with the kit, and then these two fittings that are on the pump, those came off the existing C-Star helm. So back up here, and I also had to change the routing of the main hydraulic lines that go back to the main motor. They used to come through, tough to show you, but it used to come through this opening here. I had to pull them back and route them in through this way so they'd have a more straight, direct route to the helm. So the other thing I had to do was cut 2 holes with a hole saw blade through the bottom of this dash bulkhead so I could run my hydraulic lines down to the pump. Now you can see I used some garden hose to protect the lines going down through that aluminum bulkhead, and I'll show you down below what that looks like. Okay, so we're down here under the bulkhead of the dash, and you can see where I put those holes in with a hole saw blade on my drill and ran those hydraulic lines down through there inside this garden hose that I used just to protect the hydraulic lines from chafing where they come through the bulkhead there. So they're all kind of nicely curved right down to the pump, and having the pump mounted up and down is close to up and down as you can will really help with bleeding the system too, which was the biggest concern I had of installing this system, was getting the hydraulic system bled out properly. But there's a pretty easy way to do it. Because you have a pump on it now, it makes it a lot easier, and I'll go through the bleeding process too, which was, like I said, my biggest worry of installing this system. So that's how I got all the hydraulics routed for it. So going back to the electrical portion of this, with any marine network that's in your boat, whether it's CTOC or NMEA, they need to be powered by a 12-volt source. And they say you're not supposed to power two different networks. You only want one power source, and you want everything connected on a balance. So you always want your power as central to the middle of your hub as you can. So I ran this up to my fuse panel, and I put I think it was a 5-amp fuse, whatever Raymarine said to hook up for the right amperage is what I used on it. But anyways, both my networks are powered, even though they say you're not supposed to. But when I ran my adapter to connect the networks, I cut inside of it and I disconnected the power going to the other networks, so the power is isolated. So my Autopilot system has its own power source, and the NMEA system up here, up inside my dash console, has its own power source too, and they're isolated via the adapter connection cable with the power connections cut and insulated off. So with the network being powered, that just controls the power to the electronic devices. You also need to run a 12-volt power source to the control unit, which is right here, and then that will send out the 12-volt power to the hydraulic pump right here. So this source coming into the control unit, I wired it directly to the battery, and I'll show you that here right now. So down here at the main battery, there's two power blocks on my boat. So I just connected into the positive, obviously goes up front to the positive control unit, and it's hooked up to a 10-amp fuse. Always put your fuse in as close to the battery or power block as you can on at least the positive. So obviously I ran the positive up, and then the negative from the other power distribution block there. So pretty simple, straightforward. So that's the network that came in my boat. That connects my Lowrance unit to my trolling motor. And that kind of leads into the biggest problem I had with this installation, which took me quite a while to figure out what it was. I was even on the phone with Raymarine for an hour with one of their technicians, and by all rights, like, he suggested to do the same thing that I already did. But what the problem was that I was having was, whenever I connected the CTOC network to my NMEA network for my Lowrance units and the motor guide unit, the control head right here would start lagging and got really confused. So I tried all kinds of different things. I unplugged the trolling motor up at the trolling motor, thinking that, well, maybe it's getting confused with information from the trolling motor. So I unplugged the network at the trolling motor and figured, okay, well, I've got that isolated. That's not going to be the issue that's causing all this lagging of the Autopilot system and confusion. And that didn't do it. It still was confused and really slow to respond and just not working correctly. But then I got thinking about it after I was on the phone with Raymarine, and they said to disconnect the trolling motor, and I did, and it was still having the issue. But the actual issue was the motor guide XI5 has a network gateway, and once I disconnected the gateway, then my Autopilot system worked perfectly. So Luckily, my gateway plug is just right over here. Right there, you can see it. And all I need to do is unscrew the gateway to the electric trolling motor whenever I'm using my autopilot system. So, which really isn't a big deal. I mean, it's just one little connection I have to connect whenever I use my electric trolling motor, which isn't that often anymore because this autopilot system is friggin' awesome. When you're out trolling big water, and not only when you're trolling, when you're powering out to your fishing spot and the seas are really rough. I fish the Great Lakes, Lake Erie and Lake Huron a lot, or even Lake St. Clair. Even though it's not a great lake, it can still get kind of rough and choppy out there, and in the high winds it's hard to keep your boat on course. And that's exactly what the autopilot system does. So when you're making the long runs across the lake, even if you're just using heading lock or you're powering to a waypoint, obviously you have to pay attention to where you're going and obstacles in your way, but it keeps the boat going perfectly straight so you don't have to veer back on course, because you can get turned around, maybe not turned right around, but you can get blown off course pretty easily when you're not paying attention without an autopilot. So it really saves you a lot of aggravation when you're powering out there, and it saves a tremendous amount of aggravation when you're trolling. Like, this autopilot system is awesome. I can't say enough about it. If you're thinking about doing it, just do it. I mean, it's the best thing I bought for my boat. It's probably tied with my Dorado boat latch, and I'll make a video on that too. Those two accessories on this boat makes boating and fishing so much more easier, especially if you're launching the boat by yourself, or if you're out trolling big water for walleyes, salmon, rainbow, whatever. If you're by yourself, the boat keeps itself going in a perfect straight line, holds its course, or you can have it do specific fishing patterns, and I'm telling you, like, it follows those patterns to a T. It's pretty sweet. And then you just worry about your boat speed with your kicker motor. And one other thing I want to say, there's probably a lot of things I'm going to say in this video, but if you're wondering how much power all this uses, I can troll all day with my kicker motor, and I only have one battery that's hooked up to my main and my kicker, and that battery will stay at 14.1 volts with the kicker motor running all day. And I'll be running my graph, the autopilot pump, the live well, I'll be running my stereo, like everything in the boat, and it all stays charged at 14.1 volts. That's what the graph says all day long. And I never wear out the battery with the kicker motor charging it. And I've got a 9.9 Mercury Pro kicker. So it must have a fairly decent alternator, because I've never had the battery go down. And it's running all this stuff. And the autopilot, I don't know how much it draws, but I don't think it's that much, because like I said, everything stays at 14.1 volts with the kicker motor running. And then down here, I just tried to keep everything tied up and as neat as possible. But as you can see, there's quite a bit of wires and stuff, but I just didn't want stuff moving around too much. So I secured things as best I could. And everything's been working great so far this year. Haven't had any problems. Works like a charm. Like I said, the biggest problem I had was the network bogging down when I connected the C-Talk to the NMEA, but that turned out to be the gateway adapter for my Motor Guide XI5, and once I disconnected that, everything works great, and it's not that big of a deal to disconnect that each time I use my trolling motor. And while we're on the topic of these two networks, one thing I almost forgot to mention is that whenever you're working on these networks, they need terminators on each end. So with me connecting the Raymarine C-Talk network to the NMEA network, I had to use one of the Raymarine terminators on this end of my hub. Up here at the end of the NMEA network, you can see the terminator down in there. So both ends are terminated on this network, which is a combined network now. So you always have to make sure that the terminators are on each end. So with that all being said, I'll get into how I bled out the system, because you are going to lose some hydraulic fluid and you're going to need to add it and bleed it. But it is a lot easier to bleed it because of this hydraulic pump. That'll help you bleed it out, and I'll put out the instructions right on the screen of how to do that, and you can grab a photo of the screen or a screenshot. And you can have those instructions on how to do that, but I'll show you how to hook everything up at the helm. So up here on the C-Star helm, you can see the fill and bleed port right there, that black little bolt thing there. So you need to unthread that and thread this adapter in. That'll go right down in there in place of the black cap. And then with that, you connect the hose from your bottle of hydraulic fluid, whatever hydraulic fluid you need. If you need the C-Star fluid, get the C-Star fluid. And then you just turn the bottle upside down, and I put a screw in the top here just to help keep it from spilling out. And then you open up that screw, and with the screw open and the bottle connected to the hose and the hose connected to the top of the helm, you just hold it up here, and then you follow the instructions that I'll leave on the screen. And like I said, the pump will really help bleed out the system quickly, and you'll know when the system's bled fully and completely when you can grab the back main motor and not move it at all side to side. It should feel completely solid, and you shouldn't be able to push the outboard from side to side at all, like not even a little tiny bit. Maybe the tiniest bit would be okay, but you want that as solid as you can, and that's how you'll know if you get all the air out of the system. But like I said, if you follow those instructions that I'll put up here on the screen, then you won't have any issue, or I didn't have any issue bleeding the hydraulic system after I just did it the way those instructions said to do it. And like I said, I'm gonna post a video of this Autopilot in action and go through some of the settings on it and what you can do. And maybe I'll just show you right now. One other thing I just want to say, one reason I bought the Raymarine Autopilot was because it came with this control unit, a separate control unit, and you don't have to do everything from your chart plotter. Maybe some people like that. I wanted something a little more simpler and isolated. So let's just say you're out on the lake and you want to fish a pattern. So all you do is push menu, you'll go to a mode, and you press the center of this button, and you just click on pattern, and then you got all your patterns you can do. So a 180 turn, you can either do it to port or to starboard. To change that, you just go into that and then go into edit. You can change how big the radius is. So it's at 1/10 of a mile right now, but you can set your radius at whatever you want. And then the direction, you can go to port or starboard. So that's the one mode you probably use quite often. And then you can have the boat do a box search, and like I said, you can change all this you can change the direction, the width and height. You can select everything, and then once you select the ones you like, it'll stay that way, and you can just go back into it. So you can do your box search, a circle, zigzags, which is obviously a good one to use when you're trolling for finicky fish. They sometimes like to see those lures speed up and slow down. So on your zigzag, with your planer boards out, obviously the inside planer boards will slow down. Maybe those lures may even stop, and then when it zigzags the other way, they'll speed up, and that can trigger bites. So that's what I'm going to be using a lot, probably all the time, is zigzags. And then you can do a big clover leaf. If you find the fish are hunkered down in one general area, you can just fish over top of them all day with a clover leaf, a spiral. You can do these. I don't know why you'd want to, but you could. And then a figure 8 over top of a group of fish. Or you can do a big, huge pattern search, and these can all be changed for how big they are too. So the figure 8, you can change how big of a figure 8 you want to do by the radius size, and you can change the direction you want to start it. So that's why I chose the Raymarine one, because all this is right at your fingertips on a separate control head. And then if you just want it to hold a heading and activate the autopilot, all you got to do is press auto, and that's it, and it'll hold the heading. And then once you're in the heading lock mode, if you want to turn the boat to the left or to the right, it's as simple as turning the knob to the right or to the left, just like the autopilot system in an aircraft. And then when you want to turn off the autopilot, you just hit standby. So real simple to use. And then I'll show you how to do a waypoint on the graph, and I'll show you how all this works out at sea someday when I got some more time. I'll do that video, and I'll leave a link to that video down in the description. I'll try and get that up as soon as I can too, so it shouldn't be up too much longer after I post this. So there you go, guys. That was a lot I said, a lot to ramble on about, but hopefully it helped you out, and maybe your decision making on getting an autopilot too. I would totally recommend one if you do a lot of big water trolling, or any type of trolling where you're going to be going faster than what the electric trolling motor can do. Really, the electric trolling motors can do this. I got a video on how it kind of helps the boat go straight out on the big water too, but this works way better. And it's also has the like I said, the option of holding your heading while you're actually powering out across the rough water, which is a big help when you're going through rough water and high winds. But obviously you don't want to be out there when it's crazy high winds, but if you guys have done any boating, you know what I'm talking about. So that was one of the reasons why I bought the Raymarine, because of this separate control head. Now there is another brand out there, Simrad makes one that works in conjunction with the Lowrance units. So, but you don't get a control head with it. You have to do this from all this from your chart only. So maybe that's what you want to do. But this one works equally as good, and like I said, I like the fact that it had a separate control head and it was cheaper. But when it was marked down a little bit on Amazon, that's when I bought mine. I'll leave a link in the description, and if you guys purchase these products through my Amazon link, that's a way to show appreciation for me posting these videos. I get a small little commission, and that really helps me out to make more videos to help more people in the future. So if you can do that, be greatly appreciated. And I'll leave a link on all the parts that I bought to do this installation, including the little kit I got for bleeding out the helm, and the network adapter cable, like I said, the Raymarine C-Talk to NMEA. I'll leave a link for all that stuff down below. So once again, guys, thanks for watching this video. It's probably a long video, but I appreciate you watching it. Until next time, Biker Mike out.